Hello, that was a nice way of getting your attention. Not that we needed it, but it's our brand new ditty. So we've used ChatGPT and AI to create a ditty of our own. So our staff created this. The gentleman at the back is the one that won the competition for this particular ditty. So every time you come to any of our events, you'll hear that. We're hoping it'll be completely, you'll be bouncing to it at some point. Anyway, a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Chief Spokesperson and Chief Operating Officer here at Friends of Europe, but I have the delight of moderating this conversation around global and green infrastructure. We have a stellar cast list, and we also have the stellar cast list here in the audience, so thank you for turning up. But also, I want to welcome all of you who are joining online on Zoom. We have quite a number of people who couldn't be here physically, but are joining us from all over Europe and elsewhere. So welcome to all of you. And you're fully included, so if you do want to raise a question, query, whatever, please get in touch. Use your virtual hand, and my colleagues will indicate to me to bring you in. So a very warm welcome to all of you. So colleagues, this discussion comes at a very timely, critical moment in our histories, if you like. Since COVID, we've had parallel, sequential, serial crises of one nature or another. What those crises have demonstrated or unveiled is infrastructure matters. Infrastructure of a sustainable quality matters. But we've also understood the relationship between infrastructure and its impact on communities, and how we need to ensure that infrastructure is a lever for resilient and sustainable communities. And so we have to make sure that we think, as we look ahead, how do we make that happen? How do we make sure that infrastructure doesn't become something which is dropped in and doesn't get used, or is actually done in a way that is needs-led, community-driven and community-engaged? And making sure that in the context in which we find ourselves right now, in the climate emergency, that it's green, that it's sustainable. And there are ways of doing that. And I'm very pleased that we have this partnership with UNOPS. So I'm really pleased that we have the new Executive Director here with me. But also I want to thank a woman over there who's sitting there, Maria Carmen, head of the Brussels office, who actually made this conversation happen. And so I want to thank you, my darling, for enabling this important conversation to happen, if you like. So it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you here, Georgia, to be with us in this conversation with me. You're kind of long in the game in terms of politics. You've done a number of things in the Parliament and elsewhere, and you've got this new mandate with UNOPS. What I wanted to understand from you, and to share with our audience here and online, what is it you want to do with this mandate? Let's start with what your passion is for infrastructure, to give a sense of that, and how you want to actually lead UNOPS in a potentially not different, but in an evolved way. So I'm not too political in that sense. Over to you.
Thank you, Dharmendra. It's a pleasure to be with you and with all the Friends of Europe in this important context. I've been here in the last 2 days for meetings with European commissioners, with other leaders, discussing this poly-crisis context that you described, not just the most recent conflicts, but also the crises that have been compounded and are mutually reinforcing. If you ask me what's my passion and what keeps me awake at night, is getting things done. I've been on sustainable development, climate action, development cooperation for many years. Brussels was home. At the age of 28, I was member of the European Parliament. I authored the EU emissions trading scheme, became Secretary of State, Minister in Portugal, working at UN, OECD. And there was a moment where I was seeing the figures and looking to the outcomes, and clearly seeing that we are off track. We are off track on the SDGs, because only 15% of the SDGs are being implemented. We are off track on Paris. We are on a trajectory towards 2.5 to 2.9 degrees and not 1.5. And we are off track on financing for sustainable development, because we had all committed in Addis Ababa to mobilize ODA, but also private finance. And now we see that just with COVID, the financing gap has increased from 2.5 trillion just in 1 year to 3.9 trillion a year. So we are off track, and in some cases we are even on reverse mode. So what are we missing? There is lots of conversation about mobilization, billions to trillions, mobilizing more money, more finance from public and private sector. Lots of conversations about enabling context. We need structural reforms. Money alone won't fix the problem. You need to have the regulatory frameworks, the right policy environment in developing countries. And the conversation is mainly around these two elements. But there is something missing on this. And that's the reason why UNOPS plays a fundamental role. It's the capacity for implementation. In some contexts, you may have the money, you may have the finance, you may even have the right policies, but at the end, you are missing capacity for implementation. Let me give you one figure. If you go to Africa, to 23 countries in Africa, we have done an assessment. The World Bank has provided 100 billion to those 3 countries in a multi-year approach. Only 25% of that has been disbursed with a cut-off date of 25. So is the financing the issue? Is just enabling context the issue? No. Those 2 elements matter, but there is a third element that is capacity for implementation. So having the right project design, the right skills, the capacity to make those projects bankable. And this is what keeps me awake at night, is getting things done, going towards implementation, doing operations, infrastructure, public procurement, project management. And this is the reason I have applied to this job. It's a reason why after 7 months, I'm still learning about the fantastic operations that we do. 1,000 projects in 85 countries, almost 6,000 personnel at UNOPS, doing amazing things in very difficult contexts. Maybe you don't know this, but 70% of everything we do is in fragile context, and 40% of all our activities are concentrated in the real fragile context, conflict and violent. In some places where nobody goes or nobody stays and delivers. Afghanistan, we are there. Myanmar, Yemen, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, Haiti, Ukraine, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Mozambique, Cabo Delgado. So you are seeing an organization that is not maybe as fancy as others when it comes to the media, because we don't design programs, we don't set norms and standards, we just get things done. You know, we partner with those that design the policies, we serve those most in need in developing countries, we get things done. So if you ask me what's our profession, it's engineers. If I would have to wear something, it would be the hard hat of the construction. So we are here to serve our partners, and particularly those most in need, in the most fragile context.
So is that going to be your new brand tag? You know, it's going to be UNOPS, we get things done.
Yeah.
I can just see it,
Okay.
right? Okay, and thank you for sharing that. So you're going to become the agent, or you want to be the agency that closes the implementation gap, right?
Yeah.
How?
Okay. There is a correlation that I really want to share with you between infrastructure and development. Infrastructure and sustainable development, but also a correlation between procurement and sustainable development. I'm coming from I was director at OECD, dealing with numbers, figures, evidence, facts. So I love to communicate based on facts. 92% of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you know, those that are here in my pin, 92% of the goals and the targets depend on infrastructure. Without the right infrastructure, you can say goodbye to the SDGs. 80% of the current greenhouse gas emissions are related with infrastructure. So you can do all the climate action narrative, but if you don't get the right infrastructure, you can say goodbye to the 1.5. 20% of GDP is related with procurement. So if you really want to green the GDP, if you want really to do the women's economic empowerment, gender equality, addressing inequalities, you have to use public procurement. So the way that we purchase, the way that we buy matters, and it matters a lot. So that's why, that's the way we would like to go for implementation. We are the agency that is doing operations. So we have a mandate. infrastructure, procurement, project management, and fund management. So we have an obligation in ensuring that the way we design projects, the way we construct, the way that we do infrastructure, the way that we purchase things for us and on behalf of the others is totally rooted on the SDGs. I want UNOPS to be known by the things that we say yes, but also by the things that we say no. We will say definitely yes to everything that is SDG-centric, and we'll say no to any project that does not contribute to the SDGs. It's not just one SDG. It needs to contribute to the overall SDGs. So I'm not in a trading between going green and being more equal. We need to get both. And then we'll say no to projects that will increase greenhouse gas emissions where there are alternatives. This is a defining moment because, as you imagine, because you deal with partners. And sometimes some partners come to you and say, oh, I have a nice project, a multi-billion project. Are you ready to implement it? And we'll say no if the project is putting developing countries rooted or hijacked in stranded assets, in things that are not consistent with SDGs. So this puts UNOPS in a unique place. That is, we are non-programmatic, but we cannot be agnostic. We cannot be neutral. One thing is being non-programmatic. This is something that other UN agencies do, and they do really well. And I love the work that they do, and I want to partner with them. But we are non-programmatic, but we can't be agnostic or neutral when it comes to the SDGs.
Good to hear. Good to hear. It's good to have a very kind of proud but also bold recognition and commitment to that, and the fact that this is how you'll work. You've just mentioned a number of fragile states that you're in, but also in conflict zones. You're currently, so I think at the moment, the things that are testing our minds and our souls and our hearts are Ukraine and Gaza. Can you share with us a little bit about what you're doing in Ukraine first, and then now more recently in Gaza?
Okay, concrete stuff. First question, is it possible to do reconstruction while a country is being hit and under strikes? It is not only possible, but it is obligatory. I went to Mykolaiv, Odessa, Kyiv, and there are moments that are like epiphanies or something that makes you think a lot. So I went to a school with Emily that is here, and suddenly we saw a school in Mykolaiv completely destroyed. And then the principal, the director, was telling us, well, I'm not seeing the students for 4 years. So 2 years COVID, 2 years of war. So those kids have been teleschooling for 4 years. Is the reconstruction of the schools something that you can just wait until the end of the war? Is the reconstruction of the schools something that is just development? No. The reconstruction of the schools in Ukraine is humanitarian. You used to deal with humanitarian development, so education is development, humanitarian is life support. It's wrong. We need a nexus. We need to, prevention always, development wherever possible, and humanitarian as needed. Which means that doing reconstruction in Ukraine is at the same time dealing with humanitarian, early recovery, but reconstruction. So in Ukraine, we have been working, doing the reconstruction of schools, 70 schools being reconstructed with the support of the European Commission. Second, supporting Ukraine in the winterization, so support on energy, particularly during the winter. We have done so. And now doing the entire rehabilitation of neighborhoods in Mykolaiv. Not doing building by building, doing the reconstruction of the neighborhoods. This is really important, as we know that 1.4 million buildings have been destroyed in Ukraine. So are we waiting until the end of the war to do the reconstruction? No. So we are definitely committed in this effort on the $411 billion that is needed for the reconstruction. And again, we are bringing this from a partnership point of view. So we partner with others. We partner, for instance, with UNDP on mine action. We do mine action, removing explosives. I have my colleague here, Amir, that is coordinating this work. For 25 years, we are removing mines and explosives in many countries. We are doing that in Ukraine. You know that Ukraine is now a context where the proliferation of mines and explosives obviously threatens not only the short term but also the development. The EDUCAC, partnering with UN agency that is UNDP, we have been partnering with UN-Hamas in many countries, in Mali and in many other countries. So this is about the way that we are supporting Ukraine. I was also fascinated, I must say, when I saw suddenly in my way from Odessa, from Mykolaiv to Odessa, when I've been asked by the governor of Mykolaiv to visit a project on renewable energy. And you know, former Minister on Environment and Energy, I'm passionate about renewable energy. I didn't know what to expect. We did a U-turn, we went to this place, and we saw a massive wind energy project that has been constructed during the war times. So Ukraine succeeded with the private sector support to build wind energy. I wouldn't name the countries in Europe, but with a volume that is higher than most of the members of the EU has done domestically during the same period. So this shows that the role of the private sector is also important. So the UN must play a role on reconstruction, early recovery, but obviously we need the private sector also to be committed in the infrastructure context in Ukraine.
Indeed. And it was interesting, as I was saying, to have that scale of building renewables whilst the country is being bombed is quite amazing in terms of how you protect that asset and make sure that, as soon as it's up, it doesn't get trashed. But it's a million-dollar question.
It could. I'm being very humble on this. So can I guarantee that the 70 schools that are being reconstructed with the support of the EU won't be hit? I can't. But shall we hesitate and tell the kids in Ukraine, okay, you have to wait until the end of the war? No, it's not possible. Will we hesitate about providing energy to Ukraine knowing that maybe some of the facilities will be hit? No, we can't hesitate. And this is important, not just about Ukraine. This is important in all the other contexts, highly fragile contexts, where some cynicism in the international discussion may say, oh, while they are in conflict, we can provide aid. We need to keep first having peace first, humanitarian then, later, and development afterwards. No, that's not a continuum. That is a sequencing that doesn't work. We know by experience it doesn't work. We need, these nice jargons about nexus, humanitarian development, peace. We really need to implement it in the field. We don't need the nexus. I shared this with the commissioners during those 2 days. We don't need the nexus to be the nice language in Paris at the DAC or in Brussels from a supply point of view. We need the nexus in the field. We need the UN agencies, the development agencies, all the protagonists in the field to operate not in boxes. The guys on development, the ones on humanitarian, and those on peace and security. No. On implementation, we need a consistent approach. And Ukraine is a good example.
You've got everyone's attention, you realise that, don't you? That passion's really coming through.
Well,
but
I still have my job.
No, but it's refreshing that you're not guided by that. You're actually being, it's refreshing to have someone who's recently been appointed head of a UN agency that's being political in the sense that being quite clear that there are contradictions in the system and the norms that we've been approaching with these things, and the fact that the SDGs matters, and you want to take a different approach and brand to it. Talk to us about, I want to bring other speakers in, but before I do, there's a couple of areas I want to touch upon. One is Gaza. Because I know that you have an operation there, albeit small, but there's something you're doing there which I think is important to share, and then we'll turn to Africa.
Okay. Rest assured, you'll be surprised about something that I will share with you about UNOPS in Gaza. And as I think all in the region, and Ambassador, for sure, this is something that you are following every day, as we know that, unfortunately, is not just Gaza, there are consequences in the region. The Secretary General is taking a very clear...
I'm sorry, but you're just going to have to hold it a bit higher.
The Secretary General is taking a very clear approach that is even wars have rules. We must continue condemning the brutal attacks from Hamas to the Israel population, but we can't accept a collective punishment of the civilian population in Palestine because they cannot be blamed by what Hamas has done. And the UN has been very clear about this, very clear about this. Civilians cannot be targeted, civilian infrastructure cannot be targeted, humanitarian corridors must be open, and a ceasefire is needed. This has been something that from the very first day the Secretary General has been framing, and all of us leading the agencies, we are also sharing. What can we do, UNOPS? Maybe to answer to that question, I can start by saying, what have we done? In the last decade, and maybe only taking the last decade, and we are one of the agencies with the highest presence in Gaza if you exclude UNRWA. Of course, UNRWA, they have 13,000 colleagues in Gaza, but from the other agencies, we are maybe on the top 3 on those with the highest presence in Gaza. And why? Because we reconstructed 2,000 houses in Gaza. So we constructed 400, and we reconstructed 1,400 or so. So more or less 2,000 houses being constructed and reconstructed. Then we worked on the solarization, providing solar panels to hospitals in Gaza. For instance, the European hospital, that is one of the 3 largest hospitals in Gaza, has been powered by solar panels that we have provided. That has been relevant. We have also worked on mine action and removing mines and explosives in Gaza. And finally, a project that I really want to share with you that is about fuel. And it's where you may be surprised. And that's why I don't take, so I'm being very candid and blunt, I don't take as an argument the idea that it is impossible to provide fuel without going to the wrong hands. Sorry. What our experience says that it is possible to get the fuel going to the right purposes. Experience. Since 2018, almost 6 years ago, based on an agreement that was not negotiated by UNOPS, because we are not political, we are non-programmatic, so the colleagues that are in charge of negotiations have found a deal, and this deal has been implemented by UNOPS. How? Every week we brought 3.5 million liters of fuel to Gaza. So around 500,000 liters every day. From where? From Israel. We procured fuel from an Israeli company. That company was bringing the fuel to the border, and we were taking the fuel from the border to the Gaza power plant. We were sealing the fuel in the border. We were maintaining the seal. We were taking the seal. We were putting the fuel in the power station. We sealed the power station. And through that, and we kept the officials there to ensure that this would be secure. What are the results? The number of hours of access to electricity in Gaza without this project was 5 hours a day. Only 5 hours a day with access to electricity. With this project, the number of hours increased from 5 to 12 hours a day. Was this disputable? No. Have you heard about this project? Probably not. We only hear about things that don't go well. Nobody heard anything about this project in the last 6 years. Was Israel contesting the way that the fuel was being distributed? No. Why? Because UNOPS has been there doing the procurement, the delivery, the verification, the inspection, and the monitoring. I'm saying this why? Because this is going to be needed tomorrow, and in the next day, in the next week, in the next months. So I insist on this, and being very blunt on this. It is possible to provide fuel to Gaza without going to the wrong purposes and without going to the wrong hands.
Excellent. Great. Thank you very much. I'm going to push you a little bit further on Africa, if I may now, before I open it up to the audience. You know, there's been a lot of talk about reframing the narrative with Africa, changing the kind of donor-recipient relationship, tackling the kind of colonial context in the background, and, you know, Europe has been, on occasion, quite rightly criticised for the approach it's taken and its mindset to aid and development and infrastructure development. Give us your reflections on the role you can play as UNOPS to reframe that narrative.
I think again the component related with the operations matter. You know, all the fancy conversation about blended finance, blending the public and the private, de-risking investment. I share, of course, the commitment on that at OECD. Very proud about the fact that it was during my tenure that we approved the first guidance on blended finance, first standards on impact investment, etc. But let's see what is happening. Only 6% of the blended finance, that is, you know, the use of public finance to mobilize private finance, only 6% of that is going to least developed countries. Where is the money going? To middle-income countries, to those countries that are not under conflict. So de-risking investment, well, we are not de-risking sufficiently to make the LDCs top priority and making Africa top priority. Second, only 7% of the blended finance goes to education and health. So the money goes to infrastructure, particularly energy, transportation, logistics, telecom. So I think it's very important to make sure that while some MDBs, of course, they are committed in de-risking investment, in creating the best conditions to provide loans with guarantees at a lower price, it's also important that others play a role, and it's not the same people, play a role on the enabling context, making sure that someone feels sufficiently assured to invest in Mali or in Burkina Faso on renewable energy, knowing that it is a difficult context, because someone on the MDBs will be taking the right level of risk. We need more risk to be taken, and that's what the Secretary General is asking, a reform on international finance architecture, to have more liquidity, more risk-taking, and less risk-averse from the MDBs. But you also need the enabling context, the regulatory frameworks, to make sure that you have a proper feed-in tariffs, that you have a proper competition system, a proper justice functioning. But then, again, you miss the third element. It's where we play a role in Africa, that is supporting those countries on project design, on technical assistance, on capacity building to generate projects that are bankable, in very practical terms, because I know that you love practical things, and I think that I also can share something that is practical. We don't have a UN energy agency. That doesn't exist. And probably it shouldn't exist. But we are all working on energy. It's very difficult to find one single UN agency that is not playing a role on energy. So I think that it's important that we have a convergence of views among UN agencies coordinating more, but also having a clear commitment from donors and the partners, the developing countries, in Africa, particularly on energy. I'm passionate about climate. As you know, I have done almost all my career related with climate and development cooperation, and it's in Africa that the game will need to be changed. And the numbers are quite clear. If we want to get 1.5 degrees, we will need to provide $1.7 trillion a year to clean energy in developing countries. 1.7 trillion. That's what is needed to get 1.5 degrees. Knowing that, obviously, you have 650 million people without access to electricity in Africa. And you have 1/3 of the population that is using biomass for cooking. So are you telling those citizens that don't have access to electricity, that still have to use biomass, that they have to go green? You have to decarbonize. You have to do your part on the 1.5. How is it possible without solidarity? So 1.7 trillion is needed. How much is being provided? 1/3 of that. How much ODA is being provided to renewable energy? 3 to 10 billion. You see the numbers? $10 billion a year on renewable energy through ODA to developing countries when we need 1.7 trillion per year. Of course, 1/3 of 1.7 trillion is already being provided through the private sector. But my question is the financing of the renewable energy just the business for the private sector? So carbon pricing and regulatory frameworks will be sufficient to get things done on renewable energy? I'm sorry, no, I'm coming from a country that is a champion on renewable energy, and I know that we had to invest. We had feed-in tariffs, we had to make sure that the system would factor in the positive externalities of investing on renewables. So I think it is very important that when we look to Africa, a focus on energy would be fundamental, particularly when we know that 60% of all the potential on solar photovoltaic, it's in Africa. How much money is being provided to Africa on energy? 3%. So from all the investment in the world on energy, 3% Africa. 60% potential on photovoltaic in the world. How much capacity has been provided to Africa on photovoltaic? 1%. 60% potential, 1% investment. So obviously, if we want to be serious about climate action, we will need to be serious about partnering with Africa in support of this just climate transition.
Thank you. We wish you well, that's for sure.
Thank you.
These are passionate words, and we look forward to you being part of that leadership group that moves and shifts the dial on some of these conversations. And that hard talk about Africa actually needs to seep into political mentality, especially at the forthcoming COP. And I'll come back to you on that much later in the debate, because I really want your views on COP. And we have particular views ourselves as a think tank about it, and we'll be producing a piece around it. But let me open it to the audience here and those online who would like to speak to this man, ask him a question. What are your thoughts, reflections on what he said? Don't be shy. Excellent. Thank you. A microphone is on its way to you. Please do introduce yourself.
So I'm Isabelle Durand. I'm a former DSG of UNCTAD, but currently expert on right to development for the Human Rights Council. Two questions. First of all, thank you for your enthusiasm and your pragmatic approach. I fully agree with what you said about the connection between development, peace, and also humanitarian support. But in addition to the conflict zone, and even if you are working in fragile countries, I would like that you could better define how you see or you define infrastructure. Because we know that it's not only airport or roads or I don't know what, it could be not only energy or electricity, but also something which is in between services or capacity to work also with infrastructure or to maintain infrastructure after the building. That's one issue. The second one is related to energy. And I think that probably clean cooking is something which has to be developed in Africa. Clean cooking means, of course, a lot of benefit for women, for pollution, but also for energetic aspect, and even with conflict, because we know that without clean cooking, it's also something which is related to deforestation in a lot of countries. And my third question is related about carbon markets. Probably you know that the Friends of Europe decided to start with Africa-Europe Foundation, a working group on carbon market with your colleague Damilola. I never can say a second name, but Damilola is fantastic. And also with Jos Delbecq, who is the funder or the father of the ETS system in Europe. And I would like to listen to you what UNOPS could do to help or to contribute to this initiative to build a carbon market which is with enough integrity and robust system, because we know that even the European system was not perfect. I was also in the European Parliament before, and I know all the problem that we faced with the emission trading system. So energy, clean cooking, carbon market, and infrastructure, how you define that, not only on the building, but also on what has to be done before, during, and after.
Isabelle, thank you very much for a very substantive set of questions. But before you answer, because we have someone online and who I would like to bring in, hopefully they'll just magically appear. Hello, online person? No? Okay, all right. Hopefully they'll come back in. I was told that there is someone online that wishes to ask a question. Anybody else in the room? Please.
Jamila Castro from Cities Alliance. So Africa is the region of the world that is urbanizing fastest at the moment, and we expect that it will be up to 70% of urbanization in the next 25 years. Most of the infrastructure that is needed is yet to be built. How do we get things right, especially in an increasing deteriorating security environment, not in the region, but around the world?
Excellent question again. Thank you very much. I'll ask you to respond to those now, but it's interesting what Isabel was saying, because I was recently interviewing the Secretary General of the International Energy Agency when they launched their World Energy Outlook a month ago. He said in his closing remarks that, you know, to measure that all we need is 4 billion in Africa to transform the lives of women through clean cooking. It's 4 billion is, I'd say, nothing in the context of what's possible. But, you know, we can't seem to marshal that money when we know it will transform the lives of families, actually, and women, and get clean cooking on the agenda. But that was, I just wanted to share that with you in terms of what he said, and I thought it was amazing.
And it makes my answer to Isabel much easier, because I think that if you want, I know that nobody wants low-hanging fruit and quick wins, but if there is a quick win, it's clean cooking. So it's an area where it's well developed and quantified what is needed, and I think that the figures that IEA is sharing, and also the role of the Milola in the Sustainable Energy for All, is being really focused on this area, and there is, as we know, a close relationship between clean cooking and health. And my colleague, the head of WHO, Dr. Tedros, he has been very, very emphatic in showing the correlation between climate and health. And, you know, it's important that, because we need the political economy to be aligned with the needs. So I think that in terms of communication, being able to share the impacts of climate on health, it's one of the most effective ways to get the support from citizens, both in the developing countries and in the donors community. And I think that on clean cooking is the same. If there is an area where it is easy to understand the positive impacts on health, on the communities, it's clean cooking. On infrastructure, I share, Isabel, your point of view, and by the way, I praise UNCTAD for the work on infrastructure as well. We have a very good partnership. Your point about infrastructure, physical infrastructure, is very much shared by ourselves. We don't have an outdated approach to infrastructure, to physical infrastructure, to construction. It means very little if we just construct and we don't think in the entire life cycle of the infrastructure, ensuring that the financing mechanism is sufficiently robust to ensure the sustainability of the infrastructure at a maintenance point of view. But also bringing infrastructure also with a social dimension. Many years ago, when we were discussing infrastructure, what were the three examples? It was roads, energy, airports, buildings, maybe telecoms. Now, when we discuss infrastructure, we discuss resilient infrastructure. So the CapEx and OpEx dimension are not the only elements. So the resilience, the sustainability, the life cycle, then the externalities in the communities, the localization of the infrastructure and the localization of aid, and also health, education is now being considered elements of infrastructure. So I think that we have to bring, particularly from the UN point of view, we have to bring infrastructure to a more holistic dimension. Then you touch on something that is one of my passions, is the carbon market. As you know, I've been a partner of Joe's during I was in the parliament, the rapporteur in the parliament on the ETS, and he was in the commission. And I think that if there is something that the EU has learned, it's putting a price on things matter. Let's see the example with the EU ETS. We have 11,000 installations. When we designed the system from 2000 to 2003, we have included 11,000 installations. We started with grandfathering. So we were giving allowances based on historical levels, and then we moved to auctioning. So there was a phased approach. Then we avoided opt-outs, because if we had opt-outs, there will be no liquidity in the market. And then we said, I still remember one paragraph in the legislation that says that the EU ETS can be interlinked with comparable mechanisms that would be developed in third parties. And it's why I think that there is a key element to be addressed from a development point of view, not just climate point of view. I think that a global carbon market or a global carbon pricing initiatives cannot be done with a single policy. In some cases, you need taxes. I've done in Portugal the green taxation reform, pricing more what you burn to price less what you earn. So neutrality, carbon taxes, taxes on light plastic use to reduce personal income taxation or corporate taxes. So would it make sense for building a cap and trade scheme for plastic bags? No. Would it make sense to build a cap and emissions trading for diffuse sources? No. But there are some sources that are high intensive that can be developed at the global level. So I think that it would be important to consider, and it is related with the COP, all the efforts that are needed to have more cap and trade schemes, and preferably to have those schemes being interlinked. And this is development. Because the moment we ensure that there is this global market, obviously we are creating liquidity in developing countries to make investments in the clean transition. So we should just not, and this is an entire conference, so we should just not consider aid to support renewable energy, clean tech transitions. Also market-based solutions work and should be considered in the global system. Final point from Dalila Castro on the cities. It's at the cities that the game will need to be changed regarding the clean transition, and particularly mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. There is one area that cannot be overlooked. I've been following environment for many years, and have you seen that water is no longer discussed as top priority in international conferences,
Indeed.
events?
Indeed.
Water. You see, water. Do you know anything that is more correlated with health and equality than water? I challenge. So I think that the sustainable cities cannot be perceived as just plastics, just climate, just energy. It is also about the water and sanitation. We have 2.4 billion people without access to sanitation. How can we ensure proper health, well-being, if we still have 2.4 billion people in the world without proper sanitation? So I think that I praise Cities Alliance. I have a conflict of interest because Cities Alliance is also hosted by UNOPS, the same with the Sustainable Energy for All. But I really want to praise Cities Alliance for the remarkable role that they have done for many years in promoting sustainability in cities.
Georgia, thank you. I think we have our virtual participant back on. Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? We can't hear you. You might be on mute. If you unmute yourself. What a pity. I'm so sorry that we cannot hear you. What a pity. Okay. No, we cannot hear you. I'm so sorry. Huh? Is it us? Is it our technicals? No, okay. If you can see me, I'm so sorry. We can't hear you. So if we can, we'll try and sort this out before the end of the debate.
And I will answer in writing.
Absolutely. Or you can put in text on the chat, on the Zoom chat, and then George has promised that he will respond directly. Okay? Great. Gentleman there. And this will be the last question, then we'll, because I want to bring the other two contributors into this conversation.
Hello, thank you very much for your very important, compelling presentation regarding this topic. My name is Senvi Darlington Temi. I'm from the Embassy of Liberia here in Brussels. Okay. And I want to ask you concerning the loss and damage fund, and particularly in regards to Africa. How pragmatic do you think the outcome of the loss and damage fund is going to positively impact Africa? Because if you look at, I used to work at the Ministry of Youth and Sports in Liberia 10 years ago, and I was part of the team that worked on the Youth Opportunity Project. It took us like 6 years to achieve a project of funding of $10 million. So looking at the bureaucratic bottleneck that is attached to a lot of the international organizations and institutions in terms of implementation, do you think this is pragmatic, or are you pessimistic or optimistic about how the loss and damage fund is going to play out? Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we have a real conversation on loss and damage. I've been following, since '99, I attended maybe 90% of the COPs. The loss and damage was there from the very first day. No progress, zero. So finally, we had at the last COP a commitment. So success in Dubai will be measured by the full operationalization of the loss and damage fund. And I think that from a political point of view, this is fundamental, because we know that developing countries will not accept any kind of revision on the national determined contributions and increasing their commitments to on emissions, on emission, if two conditions are not respected, or three: doubling adaptation, finance to adaptation, raising the level on climate finance beyond the 100 billion, and third, loss and damage. I would say that this COP, and I know, Damendra, that this is one topic that for sure we want to discuss, but this COP must be the COP that fully operationalizes the loss and damage. And let's not confuse loss and damage with adaptation, because for many years, loss and damage was considered as a small element of the adaptation, and it's not about adaptation. Adaptation is looking forward. Loss and damage is compensation. And I think that from a political point of view, and as you know, negotiations are, of course, rooted on politics. From a political point of view, and you know this very well, much better than me, this is a key element.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask you to relieve. You can sit down and take a rest for a moment. I want to invite both our other two contributors, Jean and Sasha, please. Thank you. Please. So, that was much longer than anticipated, I have to say. No, it's my. I think I could read the audience. People were engaged, captivated, and really, you balanced facts, data with passion. It's rare, so it's good. But also, you were honest. You gave a sense of authenticity about your leadership, but also what you want to do. And again, we don't get a lot of that. So it's great. It's great that you're at the helm, and you could tell from the audience that people are engaged. So thank you. No, it wasn't a waste of time. It was a time well used. But I want to pay respect to the other contributors. So what we've lined up for you, colleagues, is we've got perspectives from, let's say, a local, let's say, a national development agency. And then we've also want to bring you a perspective from a country that receives significant EU support. And to get that kind of, let's say, if you want to call it, I don't like the recipient perspective, if you like, but don't like that phrase. But what does it feel like to receive money? And what are the strings attached, and how does it feel? And is it modern or is it not? So Sasha's here with us, thank you very much. And we've got Jean Venvetta, who's the CEO of Enable. So I'm going to take you last, if that's okay. And I want to go to you, Jean, because there's a kind of a synergy between what we've just heard from George, and I know your views. You're relatively new in the development, as a head of a development agency also, and I found his approach very refreshing as a partner also to our work on what we're doing around creating a platform called Drive Initiative, which is a platform where we want to create better collaborative practice amongst those who are on the, let's say, supply side of money. How do you get them to speak to each other more effectively and engage in sharing knowledge, but also practice, but also contact, so that you don't get multiple funders that create vertical lines into a community? That's the ambition. But Jean, over to you.
Thank you very much, Damandra, and thank you for Friends of Europe. Very glad to be here, and thank you for the audience for being here. I really appreciate, and as you say, it's bringing fresh perspectives. So, Jorge, thank you very much. Getting things done. I like to enable, we say enabling change, so kind of similar mandate, and I also discussed with your colleague, Maria Carmen, about collaboration between our two organizations. So it's great to be here together. But Darmandra, before going further, because you mentioned Gaza and green infrastructure in Gaza, and you mentioned the hospital. Actually, a colleague of mine is from Gaza and is in the room today. So Shadi is at the back of the room, if you can show your hand. He evacuated Gaza 1 week ago. So he was in Gaza during the war. He witnessed the bombing. And actually, Shadi is an engineer architect, and he was, he's still, our project manager for Green Gaza. So in Gaza, you have what's called Wadi Gaza, and we spoke a lot about Wadi Gaza. Is this Wadi, so this river separating Gaza from the north and the south. So we heard a lot about this. And our job was there to build green infrastructure. So it's very topical. And we were this morning with our minister discussing about the impact of the war and the conflict on people. And actually what Shadi said to me and to the minister is that actually green infrastructure saved lives. You mentioned the hospital, but not only the hospital, the fact that households could have solar panels for different aspects of their needs actually allowed to save lives because, as you know, there were at some points no fuel. So it's also good for the climate, but also in a conflict area, it can save lives. So maybe later I will give the floor to Shadi, if you allow me.
Absolutely,
to maybe say a few words about the situation there and the impact of green infrastructure. So yeah, I think we need to decrease silos between different types of agencies. As you mentioned, we need the narrative has to change in international development. We should no longer speak about the North and the South, but speaking about a common investment for future. And what I heard from Jorge is exactly in the spirit that you walk. And as you mentioned, mentioning recipient country is not appropriate anymore. We are partners, and I think the challenge that we face ahead show that we need to reinvent completely our development model. And I like to say every country is in development, including Belgium, including every country, because of the challenges ahead with the climate change, but not only. We need to completely reinvent our society. And enable, we changed our strategy 3 years ago with this spirit, saying actually we are no longer a development agency, but an enabler for change, for a better society, a better planet. It seems obvious, it seems natural to say that, but it's not, especially when you come from a sector that has been built and the international development sector built with a kind of charity mindset. And still now, you work for OECD before, it's still the 0.7% rule. Actually, that's a charity mindset because, as you mentioned, the amount of money we need to invest for our planet for the future need to go beyond a 0.7% development aid budget from rich countries to poor countries. It has to be a common investment for the future. So for me, it's the whole international architecture, financial architecture that needs to be reviewed. And as an agency, as a bilateral agency, Enable, we to propose ideas, concrete ideas. And our strength is our presence on the ground. So we have 2,000 people working mainly on the African continent, mostly West and Central Africa, and a little bit the Middle East, as I just mentioned, including in Jordan. And with the practical experience we have, with the people we have on the ground, we are trying to influence the international development agenda. I can say more, but I'll give you back.
No, you've often said we need to reframe the mindset or the narrative from aid to investment. Can you give an example of what that means so that we understand better what you mean by that?
A good example first is the type of the mindset in which you invest. So it's not a percentage of the GDP, but you consider it as an investment for the future. So it gives you larger amounts. Two, the type of there was, and I know it's very controversial for some people what I might say here, but there was still the idea that aid is to be completely disinterested. So I think if you are in a true partnership, you need to be clear about the fact that both partners have an interest. For me, if we invest in climate resilience infrastructure in the Sahel, it's also our interest. Because we know that if we want to have an impact on climate change, everybody has to do it. So it's not like charity, it's also, and when you start to speak like that, the amount of money you need to put on the table have to be much bigger. I always repeat for my colleagues in Belgium that the total budget of Enable might seem a lot, but it's the same as the budget of one single big hospital in Belgium. If you look at the total development aid budget in the world, all agencies took all ODA money, it's less than the health budget of the UK. So that's what I mean, changing the mindset. All what we do here as development agents, we need to be humble. It's still very small compared to what our planet needs. And so for me, yeah, it's a complete shift in the way we see the whole financial architecture.
Thank you. And on that point of humility, I'm going to take your colleague, if I may, because you know the fact that it's just that the way you explain that you've left a week ago has arrested our attention, and feel very humble that you're here. So over to you to share some of your reflections.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Shadi Saleh. I am the intervention manager of a Green Gaza project. I am among the few lucky people with the dual nationalities that have been evacuated through the embassy in Cairo, embassy in Jerusalem. I have no words to show gratitude to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs also here. But the rest of my family stay in Palestine, and I'm here united with my wife and the children, 5 children who live in Leuven. So I'm not going to engage in a more political discussion. I will keep it focused on the topic of the discussion today. I admire the courage of UNOPS and Enable that they continue their commitment to work in fragile states where green infrastructure is also very much needed. Palestine and Gaza, they suffer from multiple vulnerabilities. It's a fragile state, but we are also paying the price of climate action that we are not causing. We are the most affected but the least contributors to it. So the community in Palestine is very much convinced, and the municipalities and the community there, to work on their infrastructure. From my experience there, being there 27 days in the war, and was also forced to evacuate from north to south, from south to north, escaping from one place to another, we were looking at basic services, and the green infrastructures and the solar panels were functional and giving people life, such as water desalination units for clean drinking water, supermarkets and the fridge that keep food, fresh, and also waste management transfer stations, hospitals. Although the solar panels that have been provided in hospitals does not provide the full coverage of the hospital, maybe for a few percentages. And all of these infrastructures were helping people for the survival. One point I have also to mention, if we invest in a green infrastructure, we have also to protect them from damage. While we're sitting in the comfort of this room, people are still fighting for their life in Gaza. And just not to feel the guilt speaking about, construction, let's get, I also admire your message, Mr. George, about, ceasefire now is very important as well. So protecting the infrastructure that we built is very important, and the hope that we're giving to the people through this infrastructure does not transform to a killing weapon where people are, that can be under the rubble from these infrastructures. So protection is also very important, and please continue the things that we are doing, and I'm sure with John also the commitment of Enable. It's much more needed than ever to engage in the reconstruction of Gaza, and I hope the war stops now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I say on behalf of all of us? All I can say is thank you, because none of us can imagine to be in your shoes. None of us can understand what it was like to evacuate with your family, and the fact you have family still there. So thank you so much, and still being able to articulate a altruistic approach to what's required. So thank you. You've humbled us all. Thank you for being here. On that note, I want to now move to yourself, Ambassador Sasha. If you could share with us, because Jordan's also in that geopolitical space. It's been subject to so much and continues to be, but it's receiving, I mean, one might say it's, a large package of support, 905 million, let's say, it's been announced. What does it feel like? What's your response to the sense of what we've been talking about? Does it feel a sense of interdependency, mutuality, reciprocity? Does it feel that it is being done in the right way, from your perspective? Over to you.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, condolences to our colleague, for all the people of Gaza that have lost their lives due to this very horrible war that is taking place. And just to add that how important it is to arrive at a ceasefire, as well as allow humanitarian assistance to enter, protect the Palestinian people there, and these are basically the most important thing. And also, since before answering the questions, just to thank you for the opportunity of being here at the Friends of Europe, and an opportunity also to thank both UNOPS and indeed the entire UN team in Jordan, and working with other international partners for their support for the Jordanian government, including in health, education, water, environment, and social protection. And also for Enable, likewise, since 2019, working on empowering refugees and the vulnerable local community through the Qudra 2 project, as well as their most recent employment and livelihood program. Indeed, very important projects, very important initiatives, and we thank you for that. Yes, a partnership with the EU that dates back to many years, a partnership that we value, a partnership that is based on an association agreement between both of us, on asks on both sides, and also on action plans and partnership priorities that deal with a host of different issues. The past decade in our region had witnessed widespread conflict, protracted and complex, and with showing no permanent possibility for solutions, and effects have not only been measured in terms of the unacceptable human suffering, the death, destruction, and displacement, but also in terms of the devastating impacts on societies, economies, environment, that actually undermine prospects for sustainable development. And attaining the 3 Ps and the 3 DGs, the planet, the people, the prosperity, are incumbent, of course, on peace and partnership, and including in Gaza right now, and which has been under blockade for around 16 years now, since I think 2007, and this is the 6th war probably since 2008. And the SDGs, it's good to know that the green structures had actually assisted, but right now the destruction is devastating, and whether it's water and sewage systems, or whether it's hospitals or schools, really dire situation, unacceptable humanitarian catastrophe over there. And we salute the courage of the UN, of UNRWA, of the international organizations that have chosen to stay there and to assist these civilian people who are under the constant shelling. Entire neighborhood, a lot of job for UNIPS and the international community, later in international aid organizations to rebuild Gaza. But first and foremost, we need to stop this ugly war. Probably I would try to focus my observations and comments here in terms of what the reality is right now in Jordan in terms of climate change and in terms of the effect of refugees that have been received. Of course, when we talk about attaining 3 Ps and 3 Ds, with peace and partnership as being very important, the latter partnership is important also for neighboring countries that are affected and receiving hundreds of thousands of people who have fled. In Jordan, probably one area that is really affected is due to climate change. Due to climate change, our temperatures, of course, have been rising and are projected to rise further. The effects have been in various areas, in agriculture, on the biodiversity, but mostly on the water crisis. And I'm using this so I can answer your question.
Sure.
We're the second most scarce water country in the world, and this scarcity affects every aspect of our life and is a great challenge on our economic growth. And by virtue of our location, we have been on the receiving end of most of the conflicts in the region, many a crisis, and the impact and consequences of these crises continue to prevail. Today we continue to struggle with the fallout of the most recent Syrian crisis and influx, with the presence of around 1.3 million refugees, which continue to place enormous pressure on the country, its infrastructure, its limited land and water resources. And for example, just to give you an idea, water demand increased by 20% nationwide and 40% in the northern area. And the yearly per capita water amount available for all uses has dropped from 146 cubic meters in 2011 to 89 cubic meters, way beyond the 1,000 cubic meter poverty line that is accepted at the international level. All this, of course, poses significant risks and affects development gains and undermines the country's efforts to achieve the SDGs, and places a high importance on water issues in combating climate change and accelerating our green economic transition. And although we have been doing significant progress in transforming our water sector and undertaking structural reforms and adapting our water systems and water efficiency, things have not been going as well as we have wanted. Our aim, of course, is to improve our climate risk resilience and achieve low carbon development. And it is within this context, and we know that these require a lot of assistance, a lot of investments, a lot of resources, and it is within this that Jordan actually appreciates all the assistance it's receiving from the EU. A big package, of around of grants as well as concession loans for a very important flagship project for Jordan, Lifeline project, which is the Aqaba Amman Water Desalination Conveyance project. It aims, of course, to address the domestic water shortage in Jordan that has been exacerbated by the hundreds of thousands of refugees. In fact, we have around 3 million refugees in Jordan, a country of 11 million. So this support will allow Jordan to be able to meet its water deficits in the future. We also would like to express our appreciation and thanks to the EU and the Global Europe team in this regard. Countries like France, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, as well as the EIB and the ERBD, for all the pledges and the support they had made to assist Jordan in ensuring that this project materializes either through the EIB loans or through the grants that have been forwarded. So with the EIB, Jordan is working on to support its priority water sector investments that include projects that contribute to optimizing the production, transmission, and distribution of water in Jordan, and finance projects in the construction and upgrade and improvement of various water supply facilities. And with the ERBD, the EU and the EU, they are promoting green investment in Jordan to support the transition to a green economy as the country adapts to the increase in demand for water and for energy following the substantial growth in the population. And the government actually attaches great importance to the many existing European investments in various sectors and forms. And we appreciate the EU support to the green economy in Jordan 2021-2024, which will enhance the implementation of Jordan's green growth strategy and action plan, as well as implementation of our SDGs. So literally, Jordan is providing a public good in terms of hosting millions of refugees, but the EU also is in reciprocity, also as mutuality and reciprocity answering back in support the international community as a whole. We have been providing a lot of assistance throughout, but the needs continue to grow, and the international community presently is cutting funds on very important international organizations that are providing humanitarian assistance on the ground. And this is, of course, exacerbating the difficult situation. Whether it's UNRWA, whether it's World Food Program, whether it's other organizations working there, it is paramount that these organizations continue to receive the funding required so that they undertake their responsibilities, as well as provide the humanitarian assistance to the people that require them. I just want to make one observation here on the climate refugee nexus initiative that Jordan is bringing forth once again to COP28, since there was talk about the coming conference. You know, the UN has recognized that global refugees and their hosts are among the most vulnerable to climate change. And my country, Jordan, to address this crisis, has put forward the Climate Refugee Nexus initiative. This initiative aims at drawing attention of the international community on a multitude of climate-related impacts that are exacerbated by the presence of refugees in large numbers. And it, among many asks to commit to work together to collectively mobilize adaptation and resilience, technical and financial support to the most affected countries. And it calls on states and relevant organizations to join the Climate Refugee Nexus initiative. And this is a call from me here for others also to support this initiative.
Okay.
You know, this issue of mutuality, should I?
Want you to, if I can push you just because I need to
Yes.
get you to conclude. Does it feel right? Is the approach the right one in terms of the EU package of support?
Well, you know, the EU package support is usually discussed and negotiated with Jordan. The relations with the EU and Jordan are valuable relations, relations of respect, built on respect and mutual interest. And therefore, and also they are supporting issues that Jordan has brought forward to the fore, and therefore this assistance and this support is very much appreciated from my country, and we look forward to, and it's multi-faceted in many different areas.
No, I know, yeah.
And very much, as I said, appreciated and has also and benefits by proxy also the region as a whole, and not benefits Jordan first and foremost, but the dividends and the benefit will also have effects on the region as a whole, and also by proxy on the EU itself.
Well, I mean, Sasha, thank you for that, because I was going to think that, you know, you just being diplomatic as an ambassador. But it's good to hear that the EU is getting something right. You know, I'm not EU bashing here at all. But you know, you often hear the complaint that it's top down, it's not community engaged, it's not negotiated, it's very much a one-way deal. So it's good to hear that that's, at least in your experience, it's been right. So thank you very much for being here. I'm running out of time, so I want to make sure as I can bring you in, because it's important that you also get a voice in this. I'm going to slightly run over, so forgive me for that. But I know that we have the online contributor who sadly we weren't able to hear, but he has written in his question. So would you share that with us, Ryan?
So it was Samuel Adureke.
1 second. It'll take 2 seconds for the mic to come.
So it was a question from Samuel Adureke, who is the executive president of Innovea Development Foundation. He wanted to raise the issue about clarifying the subject of ETS and carbon taxes as applicable to the climate financing and taxation approach. And essentially, he would like to know how the UNOPS can further facilitate our approach with heads of national delegation and embassies to expand their impact.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Before I ask you to answer, because I want to ask others in the room who want to raise questions, not just simply for Georgia, but the others also. Here, and yourself. Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Birgit van Hout, and I'm the director of the United Nations Population Fund here in Brussels. Thank you so much for your very interesting and thoughtful presentations. My question is about national climate policies, whether climate action, whether it's mitigation, adaptation. And I just was presented with some amazing research that shows, when it comes to climate change, that 1 degree of increase in temperature causes 6% of probability increase in stillbirth in babies. That's one. The other one is, of course, climate change causes huge displacement, which makes it very difficult for women and girls to access health facilities and sexual and reproductive health services. The Malala Fund has documented that by 2025, so only 2 years from now, climate change will drive at least 12 million girls annually in 30 low or middle income countries to stop attending school, which will increase child marriage. And my question is, how can we make sure that national climate policies not only look at mitigation measures and when it comes to green adaptation and interpret infrastructure in a narrow manner, but how can we make sure that these are comprehensive? And lastly, to the head of UNOPS, operational, can we really disconnect the operational from the programmatic and the normative? That's my question, so thank you.
Not to answer for Georgia, but that's the question for Antonio Guterres, surely, in terms of the agencies. But let's not go there. Gentleman there.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I am Saifu George from the Embassy of Sierra Leone here in Brussels. My colleague from Liberia raised the issue of loss and damage, and I just want to say they just concluded signing agreement between the EU and the OACPS. There was a lot of discussion around the need for streamlined access to climate finance by developing countries. In the earlier presentation by the head of UNOPS, he indicated that $1.7 trillion is needed per year to support energy needs for Africa, but only about 3% of that is made available. I don't know whether I got that right. So I just want to know in this regard what exactly UNOPS is doing to change that narrative, and what measures are you putting in terms of the infrastructure to support the energy needs of Africa? Thank you very much.
Before you give up the mic, you're obviously preparing for COP coming up.
COP28.
Yeah, and so are you and other nations of the same context coming together and going to put a position together? If so, what is it going to be? What's your focus going to be?
Well, we stand by the OACPS because the OACPS has presented its priorities on adaptation, climate finance, loss and damage, mitigation, and global stocktake. So all developing countries, including Sierra Leone, stand by the position of the OACPS to say that developing countries, especially seeds, LLDCs and LDCs, have simplified and streamlined access to climate finance that will be made available. So it is our intention to prevail on developed countries to fulfill their promise on climate change issues. Thank you.
I've spoken to a lot of ambassadors from Africa recently, and a lot of them are really vocal that there's a kind of cynicism that's really getting deeper, in the sense that this is just a conversation that we keep on having every year, and they don't see the money and the approach changing. What's your view?
Well, that's
if you
why.
Can say, I know you're in the diplomatic field, but you can be direct here in this space.
So we want developed countries to change the narrative, and we look forward to that. That's why we want to be very assertive this time around at COP28. So we're going to push very hard for that.
power to your elbow, as they say in Scotland. We'll push behind you and in front of you, I hope, in many, many ways. Gentleman over there. And I believe the Ethiopian ambassador wants to come. Are they online? Okay. So I'll bring you in, Hirut, in a moment. So,
it's me. I'm Aris Ceveli, President of Sustainable Cooperation for Peace and Security from Italy, and my question is to the ambassador. She mentioned climate refugees, and I was wondering if there is like any step being taken forward to recognize this category by the Geneva Convention, because at the moment climate refugees are not recognized by the Geneva Convention. So I was wondering if there is like an initiative, but the question can be also to the other gentlemen as well. And second, I just wanted to congratulate Jordan as well, because it's championing the youth peace and security agenda at the UN level. So it's something that's in my heart. That's it.
Thank you for raising that. I'll bring in Hirut. You're online, the Ethiopian ambassador.
Yes,
hello.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
Thank you
good
for
to see you.
Opportunity. How are you? And I hope I did not create a confusion that I was participating online for this program and have registered. And it was quite an interesting, conversation that I was hearing. I would like to start by appreciating, I know we don't have much time, the Friends of Europe for organizing this topical issue, and then also for the very interesting presentation made by the Director General of UNOPS, and also my sister, Ambassador Sasha, quite enlightening presentation with the issue of green infrastructure and the need for resilience and sustainable growth. I just want to put a perspective in this regards that when we are talking about green infrastructure or green growth, of course, the development cooperation and partnership is quite important. But I think in this day and age, we also need to see what we can do within our means, and then how we can collaborate, how we can chip in this global environment. And in this case, I just want to cite two specific issues in terms of what we are doing in Ethiopia. The first one is about creating an enabling environment for green energy. We are endowed with various types of clean energy sources in Ethiopia, including about 45,000 megawatts of hydropower energy source, of which we have only produced yet less than 10,000 megawatts of energy. So this means if we are enabling ourselves to in the trajectory of producing clean energy, it means that our women in the countryside will have a better health care, will have a better lifestyle, and their children can also go to school and have the necessary infrastructure to do so. And it also means that we are protecting the environment, because we'll be, substituting firewoods into clean energy source. So in this endeavor, we have been working hard to build on our clean energy sources. And I think the completion of the Great Ethiopia Renaissance Dam alone would add substantially to the energy intake of Ethiopia and also its neighbors. Plus, it's going to be a very clean and cheap, affordable energy. The second point I wanted to raise is about the climate challenge that our region faces. In some parts of the world, it's flooding. In some parts of the world, it could be another type of challenge. In the Horn of Africa, we are severely challenged with, cyclical droughts, and we have not kept our forests well in the past. So the major focus in Ethiopia is also greening. The Green Legacy Initiative has been especially done in a very massive way in the past 4 years. And in the past 4 years alone, we've been able to plant about 30 billion tree seedlings. That is definitely going to change the turnaround, the cyclical drought situation. And then also we are positioning ourselves to, stock take of our green assets, and then move forward to also a collaborative effort in a way that some of the speakers have been mentioning, how we can position Ethiopia within the carbon trade marketing globally. So Ethiopia would be focusing in this aspect in the coming COP28 and collaboration. So yes, the cooperation, development assistance is quite critical, but also we have to see what is quite needed within our means and within our resources in country. That will be definitely contributing to a sustainable development as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for making that, and you're a stalwart. You've been a friend of Europe for many, many years, but also you have been one of the ambassadors, like Sasha and others, who really stood out and spoken out about the need for action to match words. So thank you for joining us, and you raised some very good points. So let's see. I want to wrap up the debate now. I have to. Oh, I can't. Okay. I'll take one last one. I'm really. Oh, okay. I'm going to err on the side of gender balance, right? So one lady here in the front, and then Sylvia at the back. So Mike's coming your way. Forgive me, I'm going to run on a little bit longer. Is that okay with you and others? Great, excellent.
So thank you for giving me the chance to talk. Actually, I'm coming here today on behalf of my ambassador of Egypt. Sorry, he didn't. He couldn't come today because he's having many meetings about the situation in Gaza and everything that's been done.
We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. And on the other hand, actually, I want to talk. And my name is Esra.
Please.
And actually, I want to raise some. I have a question, and on the other hand, I want to raise 2 points. My question is for Mr. George. You talked about you have been doing 2,000 construction and reconstruction of houses in Gaza. I want to ask, is it in the north or in the south? And if you guys have done many green hospitals with solarization and everything, how do you manage, for them to be there without the destruction and bombing and shelling by the Israeli side? On the other hand, as Egypt, we have been always calling for a ceasefire now and for the humanitarian aid to enter Gaza without any conditionalities. And for you guys also, for all of you to know, you always hear in the news about that the Rafah crossing is closed. And we have to clarify that the Rafah crossing has 2 sides, a side in Egypt and a side in Gaza. So when you hear the Rafah crossing is closed, actually it's on the side of Gaza, not on the side of Egypt. Because since the beginning of the conflict, Egypt never, ever closed its side. And also, I want to send my condolences to my colleague here from Gaza who have been out since last week. And regarding the minister from Ethiopia that has just commented, of course, as an African country and with our all African brothers and sisters, we have been working on development and development projects and everything. But regarding the GERD Dam, she has mentioned that it's for development and, to counter drought in the Horn of Africa. So what about Egypt? Egypt is one of the countries that has been, confronting or being one of the countries that has been, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit stressed.
That's okay.
That has been facing, drought.
Yeah.
And our only source of water is the Nile water. And now with the GERD construction, we are facing, at 70% of drought, and all the people in Egypt are only living on the delta. So if the GERD is there, about 70% of people are facing death because of drought. So yes, we are, encouraging development, and of course, everything in Egypt itself needs development. But how about Egyptian people? Right?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that contribution. I'm glad I took you, and thank you for being here. One of the consequences of some of the approaches that have been taken historically is the "why not me too" culture of aid, and I think that has to stop. And that can only be stopped by some of the players that are involved in the supply side of finance. And I think that we need to take a much more strategic approach to how we deal with, as you say, it shouldn't be piecemeal. It should be looking at a region. And how do you balance the region out and support it so you don't get this sense of why not me? So thank you for your Indeed, absolutely. And very briefly, last question, very briefly.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for organizing this. I will have really short questions. The first one is, I think there is an actor missing here is the NGOs, and they are doing a fantastic work on the SDGs and on the procurements, as you say, but also on the peacemaking and on the delivery of aid, humanitarian aid, which is very much needed, and also on the water issues. Yeah. And then the question, because we are here in Europe with the Global Gateway initiatives, the question would be, so it's a shift towards a more equal partnership, but at the same time, it's a little bit less SDG-centric because it's more on the energy transition. So how can we, make it maybe more SDG-centric?
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to close off now, and thank you for your patience. So I'm going to go the opposite way. So Jeanne, I want to start with you, for you to reflect on some of the issues, but also just generally on what we hear, the tempo here. Yeah. I want you also to say just one thing about what do you want COP to do this time round?
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the comments. Before I reply to your question, I just want to give a few thoughts. I mean, first, on the first two questions about everything is related, and you mentioned impact on health, climate and education, climate and migration, and then from Sierra Leone, you mentioned climate finance. Actually, that's what, and maybe it's also linked with the last question and the link with the SDGs. What we try to do at Enable is decluster, not only working together with other actors and being part of consortiums, regional approach as well, and looking at strategic ways, you mentioned the consequence of what we do in one sector to the other, but also internally, the way we work has completely changed. And we apply, as maybe interesting for you and for those organizations, the one I can share with you, we apply the collaborative governance because it's also the way our teams are working. So because in Enable, I have teams working on education, health, climate. They don't necessarily work together. How do you make those teams work together to have a better impact? Climate finance. As I mentioned earlier, the money we invest, it's peanuts compared to the needs. So we need a leverage. And what we do more and more at Enable is to place experts at the ministries of finance. A good example is Mozambique, where we have an excellent expert working directly with the Ministry of Finance of Mozambique to work with them to attract additional finance, to be more acute with the latest financial systems, because the problem with finance is not that it's not available. There is a lot of money. If you ask the funds, actually this morning I was with the mitigation fund, and they said we are desperately looking for projects in the least developed countries. The problem is always the usual suspect coming to us. And so our strategy now at Enable is to work with the countries that are maybe less familiar with the financial instruments and placing technical experts within their ministries to attract new ways, new finance, and there you start to speak about amounts of money that are much bigger than what the development cooperation can give. A question on NGOs. I liked it because I worked myself for NGOs for 15 years, and I indeed often forgotten from big debates. Global Gateway and SDGs, I think they achieve the same. Global Gateway, there is a big myth. Global Gateway, it's more like a name, but basically the instruments behind Global Gateway are the same as before, a few new ones, and the focus is still on the SDGs. I think the added value of Global Gateway is the leverage, and in a way decluster traditional development stakeholders, and actually linking them with private sector and with other types of donor. I like to say private companies are also development partners. I know that it can be criticized when I say that, but they have a big role to play, and we need to leverage them. And your question, then you asked me a specific question. What was it?
What do you want from COP28 this time?
Actually, I didn't plan to go to the COP until Monday. And I said, I will not go to the COP. I was there in Glasgow 2 years ago for the first time, and I didn't like it, I have to say, for different reasons. And so this year I was thinking, what is my added value there? So many people go there. It's like a big marketplace, let's say it. But then there are two reasons why I go. One, even if it's a big marketplace, even if it's a showplace as well, a place to be seen in a way, it's still the only global forum that brings everybody together at one point. And if you don't bring people together to discuss about the biggest challenge of our time, I mean, what do you do then? So in a way, you can criticize the COP, but it's a nice place to get all people together. And second reason I go is for the question from Sierra Leone, is basically to make the difference. Because I agree with you that the amounts of money needs to be bigger, loss and damage has to be a reality. But third, maybe for me, it's more interesting to innovate. And I didn't reply to your question well when you asked me concrete example of what I mean with an investment. Actually, a good example I have is green hydrogen. Green hydrogen is a revolution for the whole world, not only for Africa, but also for Europe. Belgium is positioning itself as a global hub for European hub for green hydrogen. But to produce green hydrogen, you need a lot of renewable energy. And this renewable energy, you can find it more in Africa, solar, wind. But if you go to Africa to take, in a way, produce green hydrogen and bring it back in the form of ammoniac in Zeebrugge here in Belgium, it's grabbing, it's basically energy grabbing. So you need large investment, green investment in the African countries for their own benefit of green hydrogen. So it's a win-win. It's basically we need here in Europe green hydrogen, and Africa needs it as well. And that's a common investment. And that's not development cooperation anymore. That's basically a common investment in our future. And at the COP, this is what I want, more ideas for common investments, because loss and damage is also giving back, which is, no, it's an investment for the future generation, even if it's a reparation of the past, but also more an investment for the future.
Thank you very much. Let's hope that the other development agencies are there with the same voice, and the association has the same commitment that you've just demonstrated. Sasha, if I can ask you to answer that question about climate refugees and the fact that it's lack of recognition in the Geneva Convention.
Thank you very much. As the 1951 convention and its I think 67 or 69 protocol, I forgot. Indeed, the criteria to what makes the refugees is clear. So, if we say climate refugees does not tick the box of one of the criteria that defines a person and finds a person as a refugee. Some look at them more as migrants, and rather than. But before we start talking about migrant refugees, I think more important is that we tackle the issue of ensuring that we don't get them, and to do that, we invest in the infrastructure. We invest in the environment to ensure that they would not really have to move. If they have water, if they have less drought, if they have all of this, and this brings me to, for example, UNEP's adaptation gap report, which says that the annual adaptation costs for developing countries alone are estimated at around 70 billion, and the figure is expected to reach 140 to 300 billion by 2030 and 280 to 50 billion by 2050. So basically an increase in financing will be critical for countries to meet their adaptation goals, and the delay in mobilization, and this is not the report, but the delay in mobilizing adaptation financial technical support to climate-stressed countries will, of course, exacerbate vulnerabilities and probably even lead to conflicts and forced displacement. We should do our best to, number one, ensure that this does not happen, and to do this would mean that we invest in the green infrastructure that is required to ensure that to mitigate the climate change effects on countries first and foremost, and on what happens on the legal grounds in Geneva or New York, mostly probably in Geneva, and the definitions. We'll leave it to the technicians. I'm not really the lawyers there, as well as diplomats undertaking the discussions and negotiations. I'm not actually privy to the up-to-date discussions on the issue. But my take on that, let's invest in the environment, let's mitigate the effects of climate change, let's help countries address issues that would result in potentially climate displacement, A, before it is too late, and B, also to protect the planet and also the people.
Thank you very much, Sasha. The fact is that, you know, like many multilateral institutions that were grown and born out of the Second World War, we have conventions which were born out of a different world at a different time, and it's perhaps time that, you know, there's a real long, hard look at the Geneva Convention and other institutions to make them fit for the latter half of this century. But we need boldness and braveness to do that, and to actually have leaders to feel they can go there, and that's the most important thing.
A few years ago, there was a re-looking on that. There was a compact for refugees and a compact for migration, and there is always a possibility, as you very rightly said, for re-examining our agreements and legal texts.
Very, very different place. Now, I've eaten so much into your time. This has gone on much longer. Georgia, you've had, I know. So the only thing between closing and now is you. So it depends on how long you want to take. But I really want to give you the opportunity, not to go through every question, because otherwise we'll have another half an hour. I want you to reflect on the key points that you want to conclude on and judge from, based on the tone and the temperature of the type of questions we've had today. But I really specifically want to ask you about COP28 and what you will do and what you want out of it.
Thank you, Dharmendra. It has been a great discussion. And let me start with one point that Jan brought on financing and on the famous 0.7%. Let's do a quick calculation. The commitment from donors was, you remember, 0.7% on GNI. So order to GNI, 0.7%. We are now with $200 billion ODA. We are at 0.33%. I mentioned in my initial reflection that we are missing $4 trillion every year to implement the SDGs. And we have $400 trillion available in the financial market. So let's do a quick calculation. If we would need to move the commitment from 0.7 to what is needed to reach the $4 trillion gap, knowing that now we have ODA at $200 billion, we would need to increase the commitment from 0.7, but by the way, it's only 0.33, to 12%. So, which is obviously impossible. So if you want to address the 4 trillion gap with ODA mindset, we will need to go from 0.33 order to GNI to 12%. I think it's easier to level up ODA, but look to do for under trillions. We just need 1% of the $400 trillion available in the financial market to narrow the SDG financing gap, which means that we need ODA, private finance mobilized, enabling context through structural reforms, but also capacity for implementation. So second thing that I would like to share, and based on the excellent points that were brought by the ambassador from Jordan, and by the way, this was really helpful because I'm going to Jordan next Monday, so now I have my lesson already well studied. Carbon markets, first question, this is not for UNOPS, it's for all UN. And I would say carbon markets and emission trading, it's not about reducing emissions, it's about reducing the cost of reducing the emissions. So it's about cost effectiveness. So we really need to get it right, and this can be really important for developing countries. Second point that our colleague from NFPA mentioned, programmatic, non-programmatic, operational. Being non-programmatic means that we have to partner with those that are programmatic. So I'm eager to continue the partnership with our sister agencies that have a programmatic role, and Camilla knows this very well as she's coordinating our efforts here from the UN team with the EU institutions, and my colleague Mari Carmen that is there, that is leading UNOPS here in Brussels, knows that we are eager to partner not only with the European Commission, that has a programmatic role, but also with all the UN agencies as we are just operations. The justice is an understatement, because doing operations is quite relevant, I would say. Sierra Leone, your country is an excellent example of the way that UNOPS is supporting renewable energy and access to energy. Through the project on microgrids and mini-grids and solar energy, we powered the access to energy from 500,000 people in Sierra Leone. Final point about colleague from Egypt, I cannot answer to your question in a way that would be completely, I would say, eloquent, but I'll be just sharing my reaction about solar. When we provide solar production in hospitals, we cannot guarantee that hospital is not going to be hit. But I can guarantee that if the hospital is not going to be hit, the access to electricity is more reliable, because even when fuel is stopped, we can continue powering the hospital without fuel through the solar energy. And this is quite relevant for this conversation about going green means that we may have a more secure, fairer, safer world. Final point about NGOs, before I go quickly to the COP. We have to change the mindset about how we engage with NGOs. This idea of NGOs as a channel of aid, it's outdated. I think that we really need to be consistent with what we have agreed at the international level, that is, NGOs, they are protagonists in its own right on development cooperation and humanitarian aid. And if it wouldn't be the NGOs and the civil society, it would be very difficult to be operational in contexts like Myanmar, like Ukraine, as well as in Gaza. So I really want to praise civil society and NGOs for their brave work and its role in providing aid as protagonists in its own right and not as just channels of aid. Final point about the COP, really quick. First, what is, how would I measure success? Ensuring that global stocktake is actionable. We will take the temperature, and we are with a high temperature. Not 1.5, we are on a trajectory, as UNEP has said this week, towards 2.5 to 2.9. So we need to be consistent and to update the national determined contributions, aligning the long-term national determined contributions with 1.5. Second, let's be consistent on the short, with the mid and long term. Lots of leaders announcing that there will be net zero by 2050 or even 2040. I really want to know what they are going to do tomorrow. Indeed. 2030. So, and this is quite challenging. Where should we be in 2030? Minus 43% compared with the commitment to the 1.5. So if we want to reach the 1.5, we need to reduce 43% by 2030. What is UNEP telling us? Will be 3% more. So from now to 2030, we are increasing emissions by 3% rather than decreasing by 43%. So let's not focus just on neutrality by 2050. I want to see what are we ready to do now under the political mandates of the current leaders, not for a context and a timeline that will be, for other leaders. Third thing, it's about adaptation, doubling the financing for adaptation, getting the loss and damage fund operational, ensuring that we prepare the ground for getting a deal in 2024 about new commitment on climate finance beyond 100 billion. Let's stop the support to fossil fuels. We have $7 trillion of subsidies to fossil fuel. We have to stop it now. And obviously, let's not confuse negotiations with action. I'm a veteran of the COPs. And if there is one risk, it's about communication. People at home don't need to think that unless we get a plus, a success in all the items that I mentioned, that no action is needed. By contrary, we are not negotiating Paris. We have an agreement. We just need to get it done. So the risk that we face is giving the perception, because we are very much addicted to negotiations, and the COP is so visible in terms of communication, somehow using the COP as an excuse for inaction. Because we didn't reach perfection, we don't need to be reformist in our own place, in our company, and in our country. So I think that climate change is urgent, it is manageable, it is profitable. We have no reasons for delay. So let's aim for the highest success that is not just at the COP, it's at the level of action, and it's up to us. And thank you so much for your participation today. Thank you.
Georgia, thank you. Well, all I can say is from watching the audience, you've definitely won the hearts and minds of the audience here with your speech and your contributions and your candor and your authenticity. So thank you very much. And I hope that you get a platform at COP28 to be able to express that, what you've just had, because you're quite right. I love that phrase. Let's not confuse negotiation with action. And that seems to go to the hub of the issue. So thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for your candor, your directness, but also, gentlemen, thank you for being here and sharing that. You created a different emotional context to this conversation. So we thank you for that. I want to thank UNOPS for the support of enabling this. This is why it's important to have partnerships. So we're able to have this kind of conversation with your kind of people in the audience. You are multi-stakeholder, multi-representative, and you come from every bit of the world, which is great. Without that kind of partnership, we're not able to create the circumstances and conditions for this kind of quality of conversation and to bring people like this around the table. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time. Look after yourselves, take care, and see you again very soon. Keep an eye on our website. This is probably our penultimate event. We have a couple, we just have two left. I'll be in conversation with the Commissioner Senovic on the 4th of December, and then we have our Western Balkan Summit on the 7th of December, which will be our last gig of the year. So if you make either of those, we'll welcome you back. Thank you very much. Take care. Look after yourselves.
Thank you for you being a very good mediator.
Oh, thank you.
Recording stopped.